Hello everyone. Welcome back to Naruto Fix. Today we have another interesting what if Naruto story. Which is what if Naruto discovered Killer Bee knew the truth about him from the start. Part 1. Make sure to like and subscribe if you enjoy this content. Now, without wasting any time, let's begin. The first time Naruto met him. Something felt off. Not hostile. Not threatening. Just knowing. On that island, surrounded by ocean and isolation, Naruto Uzumaki stood in front of Killer Bee, expecting training, expecting tests, expecting the usual struggle. That came with learning to control Kurama. Instead, Bee laughed. Not mocking. Not surprised. Just amused. Yo, kid, Bee said, tapping his head lightly, you're already late to the truth, believe it. Quote. Naruto blinked. What truth? Bee didn't answer directly. Instead, he turned away, humming to himself like it didn't matter. And that was the first sign. Because everyone else treated Naruto like a problem, a weapon, a responsibility. But Bee treated him like a mystery already solved. Days passed. Training began. Naruto struggled at first, trying to communicate with Kurama, trying to control the overwhelming chakra, trying to understand what it meant to be a Jinchuriki beyond just power. But something kept bothering him. Bee's eyes. Every time Bee looked at him, it wasn't like he was seeing Naruto. It was like he was seeing something deeper. Something hidden. One night, Naruto couldn't ignore it anymore. Oi, Bee, he said, sitting across from him, serious for once, what did you mean that day? Bee didn't look up immediately. Naruto leaned forward slightly. You said I'm late to the truth. A pause. What truth? Silence. For a moment, Bee didn't joke, didn't rap, didn't deflect. And that was new. Bee finally looked at him. And for the first time, his expression wasn't playful. It was heavy. You really don't know? Bee asked. Naruto frowned. Know what? A long pause followed. Because this was something Bee had been holding back. Not because he couldn't say it, but because Naruto wasn't ready to hear it. Until now. Bee stood up slowly. Come with me. No jokes. No rhythm. Just seriousness. Naruto followed. Because now, he knew, something was about to change. Deep inside the island, hidden beneath layers of seals and ancient markings. Bee stopped. This is where we talk truth, he said quietly. Naruto crossed his arms slightly. You're starting to sound creepy, man. Bee didn't laugh. That alone made Naruto uneasy. Kid, Bee said slowly. You think you were just born unlucky? Naruto's expression tightened. What? A Jinchuriki? Bee continued. Hated by the village. A pause. Carrying the strongest tailed beast. Naruto looked away slightly. Yeah, I know my story. Bee shook his head. Number. A step closer. You know the version they told you. Silence. Because that didn't sound right. Naruto looked back at him. What are you talking about? Quote. Bee exhaled slowly. You ever wonder why you? Naruto froze. Because he had. Many times. I thought it was just bad luck, Naruto said quietly. Bee shook his head again. Nah. A pause. There's no such thing as luck at that level. Quote. That sentence changed everything. Naruto's eyes narrowed slightly. Then what is it? Bee's voice dropped. Lower. Heavier. You were chosen. Silence. Because that didn't make sense. Chosen. For what? Quote. Bee looked directly at him. Not for Kurama. A pause. For what's inside you beyond that. Naruto's heart skipped. What do you mean, beyond that? Inside, Kurama stirred. Not angrily. Not violently. But, cautiously. B. Kurama's voice echoed faintly. Don't. Naruto's eyes widened. Kurama. Because that tone wasn't normal. Kurama didn't sound irritated. He sounded concerned. B noticed. And that confirmed it. Naruto was still in the dark. You really don't know, B muttered. A pause. They hid everything from you. Naruto stepped forward. Hid what? The air grew heavier. Because this wasn't about power anymore. This was about truth. B closed his eyes briefly. Then opened them. Decision made. Kid. A pause. You're not just a Jinchuriki. Naruto's breath stopped. Then what am I? B's voice dropped to almost a whisper. You're the reason Kurama was sealed in the first place. Silence. Complete. Because that didn't just break Naruto's understanding. It shattered it. What? Naruto said faintly. B didn't look away. Kurama wasn't sealed in you to protect the village. A pause. He was sealed in you to contain you. Everything stopped. Because that truth changed Naruto from vessel to threat. And Naruto was not ready for what came next. Naruto didn't speak right away. He couldn't. The words didn't just confuse him. They rearranged everything he thought he knew about himself. Naruto Uzumaki stood there, frozen, as if even moving might make it all more real. That doesn't make any sense, he said finally, his voice low, unsteady. B didn't interrupt. Because denial was expected. Kurama was sealed inside me to protect the village, Naruto continued, trying to hold on to something familiar, something solid. That's what everyone said. B shook his head slowly. Yeah. A pause. That's what they needed you to believe. That line hit harder than anything before. Because it meant the lie wasn't random. It was intentional. Inside him, Kurama stirred again, his presence rising, heavier now, no longer just cautious. B. Kurama growled quietly, that's enough. Naruto's eyes widened. Kurama. Because that tone wasn't anger. It was restraint. What is he talking about? Naruto demanded. Silence. For the first time, Kurama didn't answer immediately. And that silence was worse than any confirmation. Naruto clenched his fist. Don't stay quiet now. Kurama finally spoke. Low. Measured. He's not wrong. Everything stopped again. Not physically. But inside Naruto. What? Naruto whispered. Kurama's voice remained steady. You were never just a container. A pause. You were the seal. Naruto staggered back slightly. Not from force. But from meaning. I don't get it, he said, shaking his head. What does that even mean? Exclamation mark quote. B stepped forward. It means, Killer B said quietly. You weren't chosen because you could hold Kurama. A pause. Kurama was placed inside you because something inside you could hold him. Silence. Because that flipped everything. Naruto's breathing grew uneven. That's not possible. But even as he said it, something felt wrong. Not outside. Inside. A faint memory. Not clear. Not complete. But there. A feeling. Of something deeper. Something older. I've felt it before, Naruto said slowly. B's eyes narrowed slightly. Felt what? Naruto looked down at his hand. Sometimes. A pause. When Kurama's chakra goes wild. He tightened his fist. There's something underneath it. Silence. Because that was the confirmation. Kurama spoke again. This time. More directly. That's not my chakra. Quote. Naruto froze. Then what is it? Kurama didn't hesitate this time. You. That word was heavier than anything else. Because it meant This wasn't about something inside Naruto. This was Naruto. Naruto stepped back again, his mind racing, trying to connect everything: his abnormal resilience, his ability to withstand Kurama, the way his body never broke under pressure that should have destroyed him. Then what am I? He asked again. But this time, it wasn't confusion. It was fear. B looked at him carefully. Something the world tried to hide. A pause. And something they were afraid of. Naruto shook his head. Number. If that was true. A pause. Then why didn't anyone tell me? B's expression darkened slightly. Because if you knew. A step closer. You might have become what they feared. Silence. Because that was the real reason. Not protection. Containment. Naruto's eyes slowly lifted. So they lied to me. A pause. My whole life. No one answered. Because they didn't need to. Naruto exhaled slowly. And something changed. Not visibly. Not violently. But subtly. His presence shifted. Because now, he wasn't just questioning the truth. He was questioning everything built on it. If Kurama was meant to contain me, Naruto said quietly. Then what happens? A pause. If I stop holding back. Inside. Kurama didn't respond. Because for the first time, he didn't have an answer either. And that was the most dangerous part. Because Naruto wasn't just discovering the truth. He was approaching it. And once he reached it, nothing would stay the same. Naruto didn't rush for answers. For once, he stayed still. The chamber felt tighter now, heavier, like the truth itself had weight. Naruto Uzumaki stood in silence, eyes lowered, not because he was weak, but because he was thinking deeper than ever before. So all this time, he said slowly. I wasn't carrying Kurama. A pause. Kurama was holding me together. Neither Killer Bee nor Kurama interrupted. Because that conclusion was correct. Naruto clenched his fist slightly. Then why am I still normal? That question was the real one. Because if he truly was something dangerous, something that needed Kurama as a seal, then why hadn't anything happened yet? Kurama answered this time. Because you've been suppressing it your entire life. Naruto's eyes lifted slowly. Suppressing? What exactly? A long silence followed. Because putting it into words would make it real. Kurama exhaled deeply. You think your strength comes from willpower. A pause. But it's not just that. Naruto frowned slightly. Then what is it? Kurama's voice dropped. It's something deeper. A pause. Something that doesn't belong to humans. Quote. That line changed the tone completely. Naruto didn't react immediately. Because now, it wasn't just about secrets. It was about identity. Not human. Naruto repeated quietly. B stepped forward slightly. Not fully. He corrected. Naruto's breath slowed. Then what am I? This time, neither of them answered directly. Because the answer wasn't something they could just say. It was something Naruto had to feel. Kurama spoke again. You've had moments. Times when your chakra didn't behave like mine. Times when everything around you responded. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. Because he remembered moments in battle, moments of extreme emotion, moments where everything felt different. Not stronger, but deeper. That wasn't me, Kurama continued. That was you. Naruto's hand trembled slightly. Not from fear, from realization. Then show me, Naruto said suddenly. Both B and Kurama froze. Show me what I am. That request was dangerous. Because once Naruto saw it, he couldn't unsee it. You sure about that? B asked quietly. Naruto didn't hesitate. Yeah, A pause. I'm done being in the dark. Silence. Because that determination was exactly what made him dangerous. Kurama exhaled slowly. Fine. And then, the world shifted. Not physically, but internally. Naruto's consciousness dropped, falling into that familiar space. The seal. But this time, something was different. The water wasn't calm. The air wasn't still. Everything felt alive, unstable. Naruto landed, standing inside his inner world. But this wasn't the same place he knew. The walls were cracking. The seal was weaker. What is this? Naruto whispered. Kurama appeared behind him. Larger. More serious than ever. This, a pause, is what's been held back. The ground beneath Naruto trembled slightly. Not violently, but like something was breathing underneath it. Something vast. Naruto stepped forward slowly. Because now, he could feel it. Not chakra. Not Kurama. Something else. Something deeper. This is me, Naruto asked quietly. Kurama didn't answer immediately. Then, yes. Quote. That confirmation echoed louder than anything else. The ground cracked. Not breaking, but revealing. A faint glow. Emerging from below. Not red. Not orange. Something darker. Something older. Naruto's eyes widened. What is that? Kurama's voice dropped to a near whisper. That's the reason you were sealed. Silence. Because that was the truth. Naruto took another step forward. Ignoring everything. Drawn to it. Because whatever that was, it wasn't separate from him. It was calling him. And as Naruto reached out his hand, the glow pulsed. Responding. Recognizing. Because the truth Naruto was about to discover wasn't just hidden. It was waiting. And once it awakened, nothing would hold it back anymore. Naruto's hand didn't stop. It should have. Some instinct, some warning, should have told him to step back, to think, to wait. But it didn't. Because whatever lay beneath that cracked inner world wasn't foreign to him. It was familiar. Naruto Uzumaki leaned forward slightly, fingers hovering just above that dark glow rising from beneath the fractured seal. The moment his skin came close, the space reacted. Not violently, not explosively, but with a deep, resonant pulse, like something ancient had just recognized its origin. The glow spread. Not outward, but upward. It didn't consume the space. It revealed it. The water beneath Naruto's feet began to ripple. Not from movement, but from pressure. The same pressure he had always associated with Kurama's chakra, but this was different. It wasn't aggressive. It wasn't hostile. It was inevitable. Naruto, Kurama said quietly, his massive form unmoving behind him. Once you touch that, there's no going back. Naruto didn't turn. Didn't hesitate. I've already gone too long without knowing, he said. And then, he touched it. Everything stopped. Not just the space. Not just his perception. Everything. For a moment that didn't feel like time, Naruto wasn't in his mind. He wasn't in the seal. He wasn't anywhere he recognized. He was somewhere else. Darkness. But not empty. Endless. But not distant. It felt like standing inside something that had no beginning and no end. So, a voice echoed. Not loud. Not threatening. But impossibly present. You've finally reached me. Naruto's eyes snapped open. But there was nothing to see. Who's there? He asked. His voice steady, but lower than usual. Silence answered him first. Then, I've always been here. The voice wasn't coming from a direction. It wasn't behind him. It wasn't in front of him. It was within him. Naruto clenched his fist slightly. What are you? A pause. That depends. Naruto's eyes narrowed. On what? On whether you see me as a part of you. Another pause. Or the truth you were never meant to reach. That answer didn't confuse Naruto. It irritated him. Stop talking in riddles, Naruto said sharply. If you're part of me, then say it straight. The darkness shifted. Not moving, but responding. Very well. A presence formed. Not a body. Not a shape. Just a distortion. In the idea of space itself. You are not just a Jinchuriki. Naruto's expression didn't change. He had already heard that. You are not just human. That too. He had begun to accept. You are a convergence. That was new. Naruto frowned. A what? A point where something older and something current merged. The space pulsed again. You were not created randomly. Naruto's breathing slowed. Then how? The voice didn't rush, didn't dramatize. Long before you were born, something existed that did not belong to this world. A pause. It could not be destroyed. Another pause. So it was divided. Quote. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. Divided. Into what? The answer came immediately. Into existence itself. Silence. Because that didn't make sense. That's impossible, Naruto said. So is surviving Kurama as a child, the voice replied calmly. That shut him up. Because it was true. You were not chosen because you could hold power. The presence grew heavier. You were chosen because you were already built to contain something greater. Naruto looked down at his hands. Everything he had ever experienced. Every moment where he pushed past limits. Every time his body endured what it shouldn't. It wasn't just willpower. It was design. Then what is it? Naruto asked quietly. What's inside me? The darkness pulsed again. Not something. A pause. Everything. That word hit harder than anything else. Naruto stepped back slightly. That doesn't make any sense. It's not supposed to. Quote. The voice grew clearer. You are not meant to understand it as a human. Naruto clenched his fists. Then I'll understand it my way. For the first time, the presence reacted. Not with anger, but with interest. That, a pause, is why you survived this long. The space around Naruto shifted again. This time, not dark, but filled with fragments. Memories. Not his. Wars. Collapse. Worlds ending and restarting. Things far beyond anything he had ever seen. Naruto staggered slightly. What is this? Fragments. Of what came before you. Naruto's breathing became uneven. This is inside me. This is what you are connected to. Quote. The realization hit slowly. Not all at once. But enough. Then why seal Kurama in me? Naruto asked. Because Kurama is strong enough to act as a counterbalance. A pause. He doesn't contain you. Another pause. He stabilizes you. Naruto's eyes widened. That meant, if Kurama wasn't there, then I'd lose control. Naruto asked. The answer came immediately. Number. A pause. You would become complete. Quote. Silence. Because that was worse. Naruto stood still. And what happens when I become complete? The presence didn't hesitate. This world would not survive it. The weight of that answer settled instantly. Not as fear, but as truth. Naruto closed his eyes briefly, taking it in. For the first time, he wasn't asking how to control power. He was asking whether he should. Then why tell me all this? Naruto asked. Because you asked. Simple. Direct. And because you're reaching the point where hiding it is no longer possible. The darkness began to fade slightly. Not disappearing, but pulling back. This isn't the end of what you are. Quote. A pause. It's the beginning. Naruto opened his eyes again. Back in the seal. The cracked ground. The glowing presence beneath. Kurama watching silently. Naruto's breathing steadied. Not calm. But controlled. So that's it. Naruto said quietly. I'm something that can destroy everything. Kurama didn't interrupt. Because that was partially true. Naruto looked down again. At that glow. At himself. Then I'll decide what that means. Quote. That answer changed something. The glow didn't surge. It didn't react violently. It steadied. Because for the first time, Naruto wasn't rejecting it. He was acknowledging it. And that was far more dangerous. Kurama's voice came again. Kid. Naruto looked back slightly. Yeah. Kurama's eyes narrowed. You're walking a dangerous line. Naruto gave a faint smile. I always have. And that was true. Because Naruto had never been normal. Never been simple. And now, he finally understood why. The seal around them pulsed once more. Not weakening. Not strengthening. But adjusting. Because Naruto had changed. Not physically. But fundamentally. And somewhere deep inside him. Something that had been waiting. Was finally awake. Not fully. But enough. And that was only the beginning. The seal didn't break. It adapted. Back in that inner space, the cracks didn't spread any further, but they didn't close either. They remained there, glowing faintly, like scars that refused to disappear. Naruto Uzumaki stood quietly, staring at the dark glow beneath him, but this time, he wasn't reaching for it. He was thinking. Because now, it wasn't just power. It was responsibility. So if I lose control, Naruto said slowly, this world ends. Kurama didn't sugarcoat it. Yes. Silence. Not dramatic. Not tense. Just heavy. Naruto exhaled slowly. Then I won't lose control. That answer was simple. Too simple. Kurama narrowed his eyes. That's not how this works. Naruto looked back at him. Then explain it. Kurama's voice dropped. You're not dealing with something you can just decide to control. A pause. This isn't chakra. Naruto's eyes sharpened slightly. Then what is it? Kurama didn't answer immediately. Because even he didn't fully understand it. It's something closer to existence itself, Kurama finally said. That line matched what Naruto had just seen. So if I try to suppress it, Naruto said, it'll push back. Quote. Kurama nodded slightly. And if you accept it completely. A pause. You might disappear into it. Naruto frowned. So either way, I lose. Kurama shook his head. Number. A pause. You balance it. That word clicked instantly. Because Naruto had done that his whole life. Balancing Kurama's chakra. Balancing his emotions. Balancing himself. But this was different. And how do I do that? Naruto asked. Kurama looked at him directly. You figure out what part of you is still human. Silence. Because that wasn't a technique. That was a question. And Naruto didn't have an immediate answer. The inner world trembled slightly again. Not violently. But like something was reacting to that uncertainty. Naruto noticed. It's reacting to my thoughts. Kurama nodded. Exactly. Naruto clenched his fist slightly. Then I need to understand it before it understands me. Quote. That resolve was dangerous. But necessary. Naruto turned back toward the glow. Not rushing. Not reaching. Just observing. And for the first time, he didn't feel like it was something separate. It wasn't trying to escape. It wasn't trying to take over. It was just there. Waiting. You said I'm a convergence, Naruto muttered. The presence faintly stirred. Then that means a pause. This isn't something I can remove. Quote. The glow pulsed, confirming. Naruto's expression steadied. Then I won't fight it. Kurama's eyes widened slightly. That's risky. Naruto shook his head. Number. A pause. Fighting it is what makes it worse. Quote. That realization was important. Because this wasn't an enemy. This was identity. Naruto stepped forward slightly, but stopped before touching it. I need to understand you first, he said quietly. Not commanding. Not demanding. Just stating. The glow pulsed again. Not aggressively. But responding. Because for the first time, Naruto wasn't approaching it with fear or rejection, but with awareness. And that changed everything. The inner world stabilized slightly. Not completely, but enough. Because Naruto had found the first step. Not control, not power, but understanding. And that was where everything would begin. Outside, back in the real world, Killer Bee stood silently, watching Naruto's body, his expression serious. He's taking longer than expected. Inside him, the eight tails stirred. This isn't normal. Bee nodded slightly. Yeah. A pause. Because he's not normal. The air around Naruto's body shifted slightly. Not with chakra, but with something deeper. Something that even Bee couldn't fully sense. And that was what made it dangerous. Because Naruto wasn't just training anymore. He was awakening. Slowly. Carefully. But inevitably. And once that awakening reached a certain point, the world wouldn't be able to ignore it. Because Naruto Uzumaki was no longer just a Jinchuriki. He was something far more fundamental. Something the world had tried to hide. And something that was finally starting to understand itself. The balance didn't come easily. It resisted. Inside that inner space, the glow beneath the fractured seal didn't lash out, didn't surge, but it didn't stay completely still either. It pulsed in slow, uneven rhythms, as if responding not to Naruto's power, but to his state of mind. Naruto Uzumaki stood there, unmoving, trying not to act, not to force anything, just to exist with it. And that was harder than any battle. Because Naruto was used to doing something. Fighting. Training. Pushing forward. But this required stillness. It's not stabilizing, Naruto muttered. Behind him, Kurama narrowed his eyes. It is. Naruto frowned slightly. Then why does it still feel unstable? Quote. Kurama answered calmly. Because you are. That hit instantly. Naruto went quiet again. Because that was true. No matter how calm he tried to act. Inside, he was still processing everything. Still questioning. Still unsure. And that uncertainty was feeding the imbalance. Naruto exhaled slowly. Then I need to stop thinking of it as something separate. The moment he said that, the glow shifted. Not dramatically, but noticeably. Kurama noticed too. Good. Naruto's eyes sharpened slightly. So it responds to acceptance. Kurama shook his head. Not exactly. A pause. It responds to alignment. Naruto blinked. Alignment. Kurama nodded. Your thoughts, your intent, your sense of self. They all need to match. That explanation made sense. Because right now, Naruto was trying to accept it, while still being afraid of it. That contradiction created instability. Naruto closed his eyes briefly. Then I need to decide one thing first. A pause. Am I afraid of this, or not? Silence. Because that question was the foundation. Naruto stood still, not rushing, not forcing an answer, just searching. And after a moment, number. His voice was quiet, but clear. I'm not afraid. That wasn't arrogance. It wasn't denial. It was truth. Because Naruto had faced worse, lost more, endured more. This was just another part of himself. And the moment that realization settled, the glow beneath him steadied. For the first time. Completely. Kurama's eyes widened slightly. There it is. Naruto opened his eyes. And immediately noticed the difference. The pressure was gone. The instability faded. Not because the power disappeared. But because it aligned with him. So this is what it feels like, Naruto whispered. Not overwhelming. Not chaotic. Just present. Like something that had always been there. Finally acknowledged. Naruto took a slow step forward. This time, the ground didn't crack. The glow didn't surge. Everything remained stable. Because now, he wasn't approaching it as an outsider. He was part of it. Naruto raised his hand again. But didn't touch it. Not yet. If I go further, he said quietly, I won't be able to go back to how I was. Quote. Kurama didn't interrupt. Because that was true. Naruto took a breath. Then I won't go back. That decision locked something in place. The glow responded immediately. Not violently. But clearly. It rose slightly, meeting him halfway. And for the first time, it didn't feel like something beneath him. It felt like something equal. Naruto slowly lowered his hand. And this time, he touched it. The reaction was instant. Not an explosion. Not a collapse. But a merge. The glow flowed upward. Not into him. But through him. Like something reconnecting. Naruto's eyes widened slightly. But he didn't pull back. Because this time, he understood. This wasn't taking over. This was returning. The inner world shifted. Not breaking. But expanding. The cracked walls didn't repair. They became irrelevant. Because Naruto was no longer confined by the seal. Kurama stepped back slightly. So this is what it looks like. Not fear. But caution. Because even he had never seen this before. Naruto stood at the center. Calm. Still. Different. I can feel it now, Naruto said. A pause. Not as power. But as everything. That understanding was dangerous. Because now, Naruto wasn't just accessing it. He was becoming aware of it. Fully. Outside. B's eyes narrowed. Something just changed. The air around Naruto's body shifted again. Stronger this time. Not visible. But undeniable. Yo. B muttered. This ain't normal growth. Inside. Naruto looked at his hand again. This time. There was no confusion. No fear. Just clarity. So this is me. And as he said that, the glow settled completely. Not active. Not dormant. Balanced. And that balance was fragile. Because it depended on Naruto. His choices. His mindset. His identity. And if that ever broke, everything would. Naruto exhaled slowly. I get it now. Kurama looked at him carefully. Then say it. Naruto didn't hesitate. I'm not the container. A pause. I'm the core. Silence. Because that was the truth. And once spoken, it couldn't be undone. The inner world stabilized completely. The cracks remained. But they no longer mattered. Because Naruto had crossed the first threshold. Not control. Not mastery. But awareness. And that was where everything truly begins. The silence that followed wasn't empty. It was complete. Inside that inner world, everything had finally settled. Not perfectly, not permanently, but enough. The glow no longer pulsed uncontrollably, the cracks no longer spread, and the pressure that once threatened to break everything, now simply existed. At the center of it stood Naruto Uzumaki. Not as someone overwhelmed by power, Not as someone chasing answers, but as someone who had finally understood. D1 truth. He wasn't separate from it. He never was. Naruto looked around one last time. The seal. The space. The presence beneath. None of it felt like a prison anymore. It felt like a foundation. Behind him, Kurama watched quietly. No warnings. No interruptions. Because there was nothing left to say. Naruto had reached a point words couldn't guide anymore. So this is it, Naruto said softly. Not questioning. Not doubting. Accepting. He closed his eyes briefly, and when he opened them again, he was back. The real world. The island. The air around him still, but not normal. Because something had changed. Killer Bee was already watching, arms crossed, expression serious for once. Yo. A pause. You feel that too, Yuki. Inside him, the eight tails stirred. Yeah. Naruto stood up slowly. No burst of chakra. No overwhelming aura. Nothing dramatic. And yet, everything felt different. Because the change wasn't external. It was internal. Naruto looked at his hand again. For the first time, he didn't see power. He saw responsibility. I understand now, Naruto said quietly. B raised an eyebrow slightly. You sure about that? Naruto nodded. Yeah. A pause. But understanding doesn't mean I've mastered it. That answer was important. Because it meant Naruto wasn't rushing forward. He wasn't chasing control. He was acknowledging the truth. Without letting it control him. B smirked faintly. Good. A pause. 'Cause if you thought you mastered that already, I'd be worried, ya dig? Naruto gave a small, tired smile. I'm still me. That line was the real conclusion. Not a transformation. Not a power-up. A realization. Naruto Uzumaki wasn't just a Jinchuriki. He wasn't just a shinobi. He wasn't even just human. But he was still himself. And that was what mattered most. The wind moved again, lightly brushing past them. This time, it didn't feel distant. It didn't feel wrong. It felt normal. Naruto looked out toward the horizon. Not searching. Not questioning. Just looking. Because now, he knew something he didn't before. Whatever he was, whatever existed inside him, didn't define his path. His choices did. And as he took a step forward, the ground didn't react. The air didn't shift. Nothing extraordinary happened. And for the first time, that felt right. Because Naruto Uzumaki, the boy who carried a beast, the one who held something far greater, had reached a point beyond fear. Not by controlling everything, but by accepting what he was, without losing who he chose to be. And that was where his real journey would begin. Not as a weapon, not as a secret, but as someone who knew the truth. And chose his own path anyway.